The Stoltzfus family of 7 disappeared from their Pennsylvania farm on a quiet morning in 1992, leaving behind only a hastily written note about visiting relatives. Their animals were still in the barn, their belongings untouched, and their breakfast still warm on the table. But they never came home. For 10 years, their Amish community held on to hope, gathering each year to remember them and pray for their return. Then, during the 2002 Remembrance Service, Isaac Stoltzfus made a discovery in his brother's old barn that would shatter everything they thought they knew. A hidden journal revealing that Amish had been receiving threatening visits from mysterious men who wanted their land. What Isaac uncovered next would expose a web of corruption, intimidation, and greed that reached into the highest levels of local government, and finally answer the question that had haunted their community for a decade. What really happened to the Stoltzfus family? The sun rose over the farm of the Stoltzfus family in Pennsylvania. It was a quiet morning in 1992. Amish Stoltzfus was already up, tending to the cows. His wife, Rebecca, prepared breakfast for their 5 children. Jacob, Benjamin, Mary, Katie, and little Anna were still asleep in their beds. The day seemed like any other day on the farm. The Stoltzfus family lived a simple life. They worked hard and followed their Amish traditions. They grew their own food and raised animals. The community was tight-knit, and everyone helped each other. Family and faith were central to their lives. However, this day would change everything. As the sun rose higher, the family gathered for breakfast. They shared stories and laughter. The children were full of energy, excited for the day ahead. But soon, the peaceful morning took a strange turn. Later that day, the family left a note on their kitchen table. The note said they were going to visit relatives for the weekend. It seemed normal at first, but something felt off. The family did not take much with them. They left their belongings behind, and the animals were still on the farm. As the hours passed, the community began to notice their absence. Isaac, Amos's brother, was the first to worry. He had not seen Amos or his family that day. He stopped by the farm and found the note. At first, he thought nothing of it. But as the day turned to night, anxiety grew in his heart. Isaac spoke to other members of the community. They all agreed it was strange. Amos and Rebecca would never leave without telling someone. The animals needed care, and the chores could not wait. The community gathered in small groups, discussing the family's disappearance. They shared their concerns and memories. As night fell, the worry turned to fear. Isaac decided to visit the church. Many families were there, praying for Amos and his family. They hoped for their safe return. The pastor spoke, reminding everyone to have faith. But Isaac felt a deep sadness in his heart. He could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Days passed, and the search began. Neighbors combed the fields and woods. They called for the family, but heard only silence. Isaac joined the search. He felt the weight of his brother's absence. He remembered the last time they spoke. Amos had seemed worried about something, but he had not said what. The community organized a larger search. They formed teams and spread out across the countryside. They knocked on doors and asked if anyone had seen the Stoltzfus family. But no one had. The days turned into weeks. The search continued, but hope faded. Isaac never gave up. He believed his brother was still out there. But as time went on, the community began to accept the idea that the family might never return. They held a meeting to discuss what to do next. Isaac stood up and spoke. He shared his worries and his love for his brother's family. He asked everyone to keep the faith. The meeting ended, but the pain remained. The Stoltzfus family was gone, and there were no answers. Life slowly returned to normal for the community, but the loss lingered. Isaac felt the weight of his grief every day. He missed the laughter of his nephews and nieces. He missed Amos's strong presence and Rebecca's kind smile. The years passed, but the memory of the Stoltzfus family did not fade. Every year, the community held a remembrance service. They gathered to honor the family and pray for their return. Isaac attended every year. He felt it was his duty to remember them and keep their memory alive. In 2002, 10 years after their disappearance, the community prepared for the annual service. Isaac was older now, but the pain was still fresh. He worked all week to prepare his home for the gathering. He set up chairs and tables in his living room. The community would come together to share stories and remember the family. On the morning of the service, the sky was gray. It looked like rain, but Isaac was determined. He wanted to honor his brother and his family. As people arrived, they greeted each other with hugs and kind words. They gathered in a circle and prayed together. The air was heavy with unspoken grief. Isaac looked around at the familiar faces. He saw the community elders, friends, and neighbors. Each person had their own memories of the Stoltzfus family. They shared stories about the children and their laughter. They spoke of Amos's hard work and Rebecca's kindness. As the service went on, Isaac felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful for the support, but the pain of loss was still deep. After the prayers, they shared a meal. The food was simple, but it brought comfort. Isaac listened as people talked about the past. But beneath the surface, questions remained. What had happened to Amos and his family? Did they leave willingly? Or was something darker at play? Isaac felt a storm of emotions. He wanted answers, but he also feared what those answers might be. As the service ended, Isaac stood at the front of the room. He looked at the faces of his friends and family. He felt a sense of duty to find out what happened. The day was meant to honor the Stoltzfus family, but the unresolved questions made it difficult to find peace. The gathering dispersed, but Isaac's heart was heavy. He knew he had to dig deeper. The memory of his brother's family was at stake, and he could not let their story fade into silence. The remembrance service had ended, but the weight of loss still hung in the air. Isaac felt the ache in his heart as he watched the last of the community members leave his home. The day had been filled with memories, yet it left him feeling empty. 10 years had passed since Amos and his family vanished, but the pain felt fresh. Days turned into weeks after the service, but Isaac found it hard to move on. He went back to his daily routines, tending to his own farm. But thoughts of Amos and the unanswered questions haunted him. He often found himself staring into the distance, lost in memories of his brother's laughter and guidance. In the quiet of the evenings, Isaac would sit on his porch, looking out at the fields. He thought about his brother's family and the life they had built together. The children had been so full of joy. Jacob had loved to chase rabbits. Benjamin had a talent for fixing things. Mary was always reading. Katie had a flair for cooking, and little Anna had brought smiles to everyone's face. They were all gone now, and Isaac felt the weight of their absence. One afternoon, as he cleaned the barn, he came across an old box. It was dusty and covered in cobwebs. Curious, he opened it to find some old tools and photographs. As he sifted through the items, a small piece of paper fell out. It was a note from Amos. Isaac's heart raced as he read the familiar handwriting. The note spoke of simple things, chores, family gatherings, and the beauty of their land. But one line caught Isaac's attention. Amos had written about feeling pressure from outsiders regarding their farm. The note was dated just weeks before their disappearance. Isaac felt a chill run down his spine. What did Amos mean by pressure? Determined to find answers, Isaac decided to visit the barn again. He hoped to uncover more clues. As he entered, the smell of hay and wood greeted him. He searched every corner, every box, hoping to find something that would shed light on his brother's fate. Hours passed, and just as he was about to give up, Isaac noticed a loose board in the corner of the barn. He pried it up and found a small, dusty journal hidden inside. His heart raced as he opened it. The pages were filled with Amos's neat handwriting. Isaac sat on the barn floor and began to read. The journal detailed Amos's thoughts and fears. He wrote about his love for his family and the joy of working on the farm. But as the entries continued, Isaac noticed a change. Amos began to write about strange visits from men he did not know. They had come to talk about selling the land. Isaac's heart sank. He read about Amos's fears of losing their home, the land that had been in their family for generations. He described how the men pressured him to sell, saying they had big plans for the area. They spoke of development and money, but Amos valued his family's way of life above all else. In the journal, Amos wrote about feeling trapped. He mentioned how the visits made him anxious. Isaac felt a knot in his stomach. These men must have been the reason for Amos's worry. They were likely connected to the family's disappearance. Isaac closed the journal, deep in thought. The pressure on Amos had been real. He needed to find out who these men were. He decided to share his findings with a few trusted friends. They would help him uncover the truth. The next day, Isaac invited two close friends, Daniel and Naomi, over for coffee. He sat them down and shared the journal's contents. Daniel looked concerned, while Naomi listened intently. Isaac explained how Amos had felt pressured and anxious. He told them about the strange men who had visited the farm. Naomi spoke first. She had known Amos well and could feel his pain through Isaac's words. She suggested they gather information about the developers mentioned in the journal. Daniel agreed, his brow furrowed in thought. Together, they decided to dig deeper. The following days were filled with research. They visited the local library and combed through old newspapers. They discovered articles about a real estate company planning to buy land in the area. The company had a reputation for aggressive tactics and had faced accusations of intimidation. Isaac's heart raced as he read about the company. It was the same one Amish had written about in his journal. They had been trying to acquire land from local families for years. Isaac felt a mix of anger and fear. He was sure the developers were connected to his brother's family disappearing. As they continued their investigation, Isaac and his friends reached out to other families in the community. They found that many had faced similar pressure from the same company. Some had sold their land, while others had refused and faced intimidation. The community was divided. Some believed it was best to keep peace and not provoke the developers. Others felt that standing up for their rights was necessary. Isaac felt the tension grow. He was determined to find the truth, but he knew it would not be easy. One evening, as they gathered to discuss their findings, Naomi spoke up. She suggested they reach out to a local journalist. She believed the journalist could help shine a light on the developers' actions. Isaac agreed. They needed to bring the community together and expose the truth. With a plan in place, Isaac felt a renewed sense of hope. He was ready to take action. Together with his friends, they would uncover the truth about the Stoltzfus family's disappearance. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Isaac knew he had to fight for his brother and his family. They deserved justice, and he was determined to find it. Isaac felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he prepared to meet the local journalist. He had reached out to Sarah, a reporter known for her investigative work. She had a reputation for uncovering the truth, and Isaac hoped she could help him and his friends expose the developers. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon at the local diner. Isaac arrived early, his heart racing. He sat at a small table in the corner, looking out the window. The sun was bright, but the warmth did little to calm his nerves. He thought of Amish and his family, and the need for justice pushed him forward. Sarah arrived a few minutes later. She was in her 30s, with a notebook tucked under her arm and a determined look on her face. Isaac stood to greet her. After a brief introduction, they sat down, and he wasted no time explaining the situation. He shared the story of the Stoltzfus family's disappearance and the pressure Amish had faced from the developers. He told Sarah about the journal he found and the strange visits Amish had received. As he spoke, Sarah took notes, her eyes focused on him. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked, looking up from her notebook. Isaac nodded. He shared the details from the journal and the articles they had found about the real estate company. Sarah listened carefully, asking questions along the way. She seemed genuinely interested in the story. "This is serious," she said after he finished. "If what you say is true, it could expose a lot of corruption in this area. I can help you, but we need to gather more information." Isaac felt a surge of hope. This was the breakthrough they needed. Together, they discussed a plan to investigate the developers further. Sarah suggested interviewing other families who had faced similar pressure. She believed their stories could help build a case against the company. Over the next few weeks, Isaac, Sarah, and his friends worked tirelessly. They visited families across the community, gathering stories of intimidation and fear. Many were hesitant to speak out, worried about the consequences. But Isaac reassured them. He explained that they needed to unite for the truth. One afternoon, they met with an elderly couple, the Fishers, who had refused to sell their land. Eli and Hannah Fisher had lived on their farm for decades. They shared their experience with the developers, describing how they had been threatened and harassed. Isaac listened carefully, his heart heavy for the couple. "They wanted us to leave, but this land is our home," Eli said, his voice shaking. "We won't be pushed around." Isaac admired their strength. He thanked them for sharing their story and promised to help. Each family they spoke with added to the growing file of evidence against the developers. Sarah continued to write everything down, her determination shining through. As the investigation progressed, Isaac noticed a change in the community. More people began to speak out. They shared their experiences, fueled by the hope that justice could be served. But not everyone was supportive. Some community members were still afraid of the developers and wanted to keep the peace. One evening, tensions boiled over during a community meeting. Isaac stood up to voice his concerns about the developers. He spoke about the families who had suffered and the importance of standing together. "You can't let fear control you," he urged. "We must fight for our rights and for the memory of the Stoltzfus family." An elder named Ezra, who had always been respected in the community, challenged him. "Sometimes, it's better to let the past go. We don't need more trouble. The Stoltzfus family is gone. They left us." Isaac felt a wave of frustration. "But we don't know what really happened. We owe it to Amish and his family to find out the truth." The room grew tense, and Isaac could feel the divide. Some nodded in agreement with Isaac, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The meeting ended without resolution, but Isaac knew he could not give up. Sarah continued to push forward. She organized a public event to raise awareness about the developers and the families affected. Isaac and his friends helped spread the word. They hoped to gather the community and present their findings. On the day of the event, the small town hall was filled with people. Isaac stood at the front, his heart pounding. He looked out at the familiar faces of friends, family, and neighbors. They had come to listen, to learn, and hopefully to join the fight. Sarah began the presentation. She shared the stories they had gathered, highlighting the experiences of the Fishers and others. Isaac watched as people reacted, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and anger. This was the moment they had worked so hard for. After Sarah finished, Isaac took the microphone. He spoke from his heart, sharing his memories of Amish and his family. He reminded everyone of the importance of community and standing up for what was right. "We cannot let fear silence us any longer," he said firmly. "We owe it to the Stoltzfus family and to ourselves. We must fight for our land and our way of life." As he finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood up, voices filled with determination. Isaac felt a surge of hope wash over him. The community was finally coming together. They were ready to confront the darkness that had lingered for too long. But in the back of his mind, Isaac knew the fight was far from over. The developers would not back down easily. He could already sense the tension in the air. As the crowd discussed their next steps, Isaac felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth about the Stoltzfus family had to be uncovered, and he would not stop until it was. The energy from the community event lingered in the air for days. Isaac felt a renewed sense of hope. People were talking about the Stoltzfus family and the need for justice. The support from his neighbors was stronger than ever. But even with this momentum, Isaac knew they needed to dig deeper into the truth behind the developers. After the event, Sarah suggested they meet again to discuss their next steps. She wanted to analyze all the information they had gathered. Isaac invited her and his friends, Daniel and Naomi, to his home for the meeting. As they gathered around the kitchen table, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Isaac laid out the stories they had collected, along with the notes from Amish's journal. Sarah began to organize their findings, creating a timeline of events and names. "Let's focus on the developers," Sarah said, her pen moving quickly across the paper. "We need to find out who they are and what they want." Isaac nodded. "I want to know more about their plans for the land. Why are they so interested in our farms? What are they hiding?" Daniel suggested they visit the local planning office. They could request documents about the developers' plans for the area. It was a good idea, and everyone agreed. The next day, Isaac, Sarah, and Naomi made their way to the planning office. The building was small and unassuming, but it held information that could be crucial to their investigation. They walked inside and approached the receptionist. Isaac explained their purpose. "We'd like to see any documents related to the real estate company and their plans for our area." The receptionist nodded and led them to a small room filled with file cabinets. She began to pull out folders, but Isaac felt a sense of unease. He wondered if they would find what they were looking for. After some time, the receptionist returned with several documents. Isaac's heart raced as he flipped through the pages. He found maps, proposals, and agreements. The documents showed plans for new developments, including houses and shopping centers. But what caught his eye was a mention of acquiring land from local families. "This is it," Isaac said, excitement rising in his voice. "They are trying to buy up as much land as possible." Sarah leaned over to read the documents. "Look here," she pointed. "These plans show they intend to build a large commercial area. They need the land to expand their business." As they continued reading, they found a list of names, families who had already sold their land to the developers. Isaac's heart sank as he recognized some of the names. They were families he had grown up with. He realized the developers were not just after land. They were breaking apart the community. "This isn't just about business," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "This is about destroying our way of life." Isaac felt a surge of anger. "We have to find a way to stop them. We need to unite the community against these plans." With the documents in hand, they decided to return to the community center. They wanted to share their findings and rally more support. When they arrived, the room was already buzzing with people. Families had come to discuss the developers and their plans. Isaac stepped forward, holding up the documents. "Everyone, we need to talk about what we found. The developers are trying to take our land, and we can't let them." As he spoke, he explained the plans they had discovered. He shared the names of families who had sold their land and the potential harm to their community. The room fell silent as people absorbed the information. "What can we do?" someone asked from the back. "We must band together," Isaac replied. "We can refuse to sell. We can fight back. But we need everyone's support." The crowd began to murmur, voices rising with determination. Isaac could feel the energy building. People began to share their own stories of pressure and fear. More families spoke up, revealing the tactics the developers had used against them. As the meeting progressed, Isaac noticed a shift. The fear that had once paralyzed many was turning into resolve. They were ready to stand up for their rights. Naomi suggested they organize a public protest against the developers. "We need to show them that we are united. We need to make our voices heard." The idea excited everyone. They began to discuss plans for the protest, including signs and flyers. Isaac felt a sense of pride. Their community was coming together to fight for their future. As they left the meeting, Isaac felt a mix of emotions. He was hopeful but also aware of the risks they faced. The developers would not back down easily. He knew they were dealing with powerful people who would do anything to protect their interests. In the following days, the group worked hard to prepare for the protest. They created signs with powerful messages about unity and the importance of preserving their land. Sarah helped spread the word through social media, and soon, more people from neighboring communities were joining their cause. On the day of the protest, the sun shone brightly. The air was filled with excitement and determination. People gathered outside the planning office, holding signs and chanting. Isaac felt a rush of energy as he joined his friends and neighbors. As the protest began, Isaac took a moment to look around. Families were standing together, their faces filled with hope. He thought of Amish and his family, and the fight they were all engaged in. But Isaac also felt a sense of dread. He knew the developers would not take this lightly. As the crowd rallied, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. He had to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The fight for justice had only just begun. The protest was a sea of signs and voices. Isaac stood at the front, feeling the energy of the crowd. People shouted for their rights, demanding that the developers leave their land alone. It was a powerful moment, and Isaac felt a rush of pride. The community was united in their fight. As they chanted slogans, he noticed a few people in suits standing at a distance. They were the developers. Isaac recognized them from photos he had seen in the newspaper. They watched the protest with cold expressions. Isaac's heart raced. He wondered if they would try to silence the crowd. Sarah stood beside Isaac, holding her camera. She captured the moment, wanting to record their fight for justice. "This is important," she said, her voice firm. "We need to show the world what's happening here." The protest continued, and Isaac spoke to the crowd. He reminded them of the importance of standing together. He shared stories of families who had been pressured and intimidated. As he spoke, the crowd roared with approval. He felt their determination, and it fueled his own. But as the sun began to set, the atmosphere shifted. The developers stepped forward, and Isaac felt a wave of tension sweep over the crowd. One of the men, a tall figure with a stern face, began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice booming. "We understand your concerns, but this development is necessary for the future of this community. We are offering fair prices for your land." The crowd erupted in shouts of anger. Isaac could see the frustration on their faces. They were not interested in money. They wanted to preserve their home and way of life. "Your offers mean nothing to us," someone yelled from the back. "We won't sell." The man from the developers continued, unfazed by the crowd's reaction. "You are making a mistake. This is progress. You will regret it if you refuse." Isaac felt a surge of defiance. "We will not regret standing up for our rights. This land is our home." The tension in the air grew thicker as the developers tried to intimidate the crowd. Isaac could see the fear in some people's eyes, but he knew they could not back down. They had to show strength. As the protest continued, more community members joined in. Families rallied together, standing shoulder to shoulder. Isaac felt a sense of hope as the crowd grew larger. They were united, and it was a powerful sight. Just then, a police officer arrived on the scene. He walked over to Isaac and Sarah, looking serious. "You need to disperse," he said. "You can't block the road like this." Isaac felt frustration rising. "We have the right to protest. We are fighting for our homes." The officer nodded but remained firm. "I understand, but you need to clear the area. We don't want any trouble." Isaac glanced at the crowd. He could see that some were worried about the police presence. "Everyone, let's stay calm," he said, raising his hands. "We can't let fear control us." Sarah stepped forward. "We are not causing trouble. We are standing up for our rights. The officer looked between them, clearly torn. I will give you a few more minutes. But after that, you need to leave. Time felt like it was slipping away. Isaac knew they had to make their message clear before the police forced them to leave. Everyone, listen, he shouted. This is our moment to be heard. Let's stand strong together. The crowd cheered, their voices rising in unison. Isaac felt a wave of determination wash over him. They would not be silenced. As the minutes ticked by, Isaac noticed the developers retreating to their cars. They seemed frustrated, and for a moment, hope flickered in Isaac's heart. Maybe their protest was working. But just as the crowd began to feel victorious, a loud voice rang out from behind them. Get back. Move away from the road. Isaac turned to see several men in dark uniforms approaching. They were security personnel hired by the developers. The men pushed through the crowd, trying to intimidate the protesters. Isaac felt a rush of fear. This was not what he had expected. Stay together, he yelled to the crowd. Do not let them scare you. The tension escalated as the security personnel moved closer. Isaac saw one of them grab a protester by the arm, pulling him away from the group. The crowd gasped, and Isaac felt his heart race. This was crossing a line. Let him go, Isaac shouted, stepping forward. He could feel the anger rising within him. You have no right to treat us this way. The security personnel exchanged glances, clearly unsure about how to handle the situation. More protesters began to push back, standing firm against the intimidation. Isaac could see their determination. They were ready to fight for their rights. Sarah raised her camera, capturing the moment of defiance. This is what they don't want to see, she shouted. We will not back down. The atmosphere was electric. Isaac could feel the power of the community around him. They were standing up for themselves, refusing to be bullied. Just then, the police officer stepped in front of the security personnel. What's going on here? He demanded, his voice authoritative. Isaac took a deep breath, hoping for support. They are trying to intimidate us. We are peacefully protesting. The officer looked at both sides, assessing the situation. After a tense moment, he turned to the security personnel. You need to back off. Let them protest. The tension in the air shifted once again. Isaac felt a wave of relief wash over him. The police officer had chosen to support the community. The crowd erupted in cheers, feeling emboldened. With the security personnel stepping back, the protest continued. Isaac looked around at his neighbors, strength and unity shining in their faces. They were fighting for their homes and their future, and Isaac knew they had to keep pushing forward. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the crowd, Isaac felt a spark of hope. They had stood up to intimidation, and they were not going to stop now. The fight for justice was just beginning, and Isaac was ready to see it through to the end. The protest had ended, but the fight was far from over. Isaac felt a mixture of relief and determination as he headed home. The support from the community had been strong, but he knew the developers would not give up easily. That night, he gathered with Sarah, Daniel, and Naomi to discuss their next steps. They met at Isaac's farmhouse, sitting around the kitchen table. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a sense of purpose. Isaac opened the discussion. We need to keep this momentum going. We can't let the developers think we're backing down. Sarah nodded. I agree. We need to reach more people and show them how serious this is. But we also need to be careful. The developers are watching us. Daniel leaned in, looking concerned. Some people in the community still want to avoid conflict. They think we should let the developers do what they want. We need to change their minds. Naomi added, we should hold another meeting. We can invite everyone and share what we've learned. If people see the facts, they might join us. Isaac felt a surge of hope. That's a great idea. We can show them the documents we found and the stories we've gathered. It's important for everyone to understand what's at stake. The group spent the next few days preparing for the meeting. They printed flyers, organized their materials, and reached out to as many people as possible. Isaac felt a sense of urgency. They had to act fast before the developers made any moves. On the day of the meeting, the community center was buzzing with activity. Isaac arrived early to set up. He arranged chairs and made sure the projector was ready for Sarah's presentation. As people began to arrive, he welcomed them with a smile, but inside, he felt anxious. The room filled with familiar faces, but some were hesitant. Isaac could see the uncertainty in their eyes. He knew they had to present a strong case to convince everyone to join the fight. When the meeting began, Isaac stood at the front of the room, his heart racing. Thank you all for coming, he said. Today, we need to talk about what's happening with our land and our community. Sarah began the presentation, showing the documents they had gathered. She explained the developers' plans and how they were trying to acquire land from local families. Isaac watched as people listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. As Sarah shared stories from families who had faced pressure, the room grew quiet. Isaac could see the impact of their words. The stories resonated with those present. They were not alone. Many had faced similar challenges. What the developers want is not just land, Isaac said, stepping forward. It's our way of life. They want to change everything we hold dear. We cannot let this happen. A voice from the back spoke up. But what can we do? They have power and money. Isaac took a deep breath. We have power too. We have each other. If we stand together, we can fight back. Naomi added, we can refuse to sell. We can protect our way of life. But we need everyone to be involved. People began to murmur, and Isaac felt a sense of hope rising in the room. They were starting to see the truth. He could feel their resolve building, and he knew they had to keep pushing forward. As the meeting continued, more people began to speak. They shared their experiences with the developers, revealing stories of intimidation and fear. Isaac felt a wave of anger wash over him. These were the same tactics Amish had faced. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The community was coming together, fueled by a shared purpose. They were ready to take a stand, and Isaac knew they had to act quickly. As the meeting drew to a close, he encouraged everyone to think about their next steps. We need to form a committee to keep communicating and planning. We have to show the developers that we will not back down. The crowd erupted in applause, and Isaac felt a surge of pride. They had come together as a community, united in their purpose. As people began to leave, they expressed their support and commitment to the cause. But as the night wore on, Isaac couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He knew the developers would retaliate. They had already shown they were willing to use intimidation. Just as he was about to head to bed, he received a text from Sarah. Come to the farm. I found something. Isaac's heart raced as he drove to Sarah's house. When he arrived, he found her pacing in the living room, her expression serious. I found some documents in the planning office that might be important, she said, handing him a folder. Isaac opened it and began to read. The documents detailed financial transactions between the developers and local officials. They revealed a web of corruption that connected the developers to people in power. Isaac's heart sank as he processed the information. This is huge, he said, looking up at Sarah. If we can prove this, it could change everything. Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with determination. We need to expose this. It's the key to stopping them. They spent the rest of the night strategizing, discussing how to present the information to the community and how to approach the authorities. Isaac felt a sense of urgency. They had to act quickly before the developers could silence them. As the sun began to rise, Isaac knew they were on the brink of a significant breakthrough. The fight for their land was intensifying, and he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together with Sarah, Daniel, and Naomi, he was determined to uncover the truth and protect their community. The battle was just beginning, and they would not back down. Isaac felt a surge of adrenaline as he and Sarah prepared to confront the developers. They had gathered significant evidence, and now it was time to take a stand. A meeting was scheduled with one of the developers, a man named Thomas Hartwell. Isaac knew this was a chance to express their concerns directly, but he also understood the risks involved. On the day of the meeting, Isaac and Sarah arrived at a local coffee shop. The atmosphere was tense. They found a table in the corner, waiting for Thomas to arrive. Isaac's heart raced. He was nervous but determined to stand up for his community. When Thomas walked in, he wore a confident smile. He approached their table, extending his hand. Good to see you both, he said, his voice smooth. I hope we can have a productive conversation. Isaac shook his hand but felt a wave of distrust. We need to talk about your plans for the land, he said firmly, gesturing for Thomas to sit down. Sarah opened her folder and placed the documents on the table. We have serious concerns about your development plans and how they will affect our community, she said, her voice steady. Thomas raised an eyebrow, glancing at the papers. I understand your concerns, but this development is for the good of the community. It will bring jobs and growth. Isaac leaned in, his voice intense. At what cost? You're pushing families out of their homes. You're breaking apart our community. Thomas's expression shifted slightly. I assure you, we're offering fair prices for the land. Families have the right to sell if they choose. Sarah pointed to the documents. But many families have faced intimidation. We have evidence of pressure tactics used against those who refuse to sell. This is not just business, it's exploitation. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his smile fading. You don't understand the bigger picture. Development is necessary. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for progress. Isaac felt anger bubbling inside him. Sacrifices? These are people's lives. You're taking away their homes, their way of life. We won't stand by and let you destroy our community. Thomas's demeanor changed. He looked at them coldly. You should be careful. Fighting this will only lead to trouble. I suggest you think about what you're doing. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening us? Thomas leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm simply stating the facts. You're playing a dangerous game. You don't know the forces you're up against. Isaac felt a chill run down his spine. This was not just a business deal. It was something deeper, something more sinister. We won't back down, he said firmly. We will expose the truth. Thomas stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. I hope you know what you're doing. The community may not be as united as you think. You could lose everything. With that, Thomas turned and walked away, leaving Isaac and Sarah in a state of shock. They exchanged worried glances, understanding the weight of Thomas's words. He was right about one thing. The fight ahead would be dangerous. As they left the coffee shop, Isaac felt a surge of determination. We need to show the community what we have. If they see the truth, they will rally behind us. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. We need to organize another meeting. We can present the evidence and remind everyone what's at stake. The next few days were filled with planning. Isaac and Sarah reached out to families in the community, urging them to attend the upcoming meeting. They needed as many voices as possible to stand against the developers. On the night of the meeting, the community center was packed. People filled the chairs, chatting anxiously. Isaac stood at the front, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. He knew this was a crucial moment. Sarah began the presentation, sharing the evidence they had gathered. She explained the pressure tactics used by the developers and how they had affected families in the area. Isaac watched the crowd react, their expression shifting from concern to anger. This is not just about land, it's about our community, Isaac said, stepping forward. We need to stand together and fight back. We can't allow the developers to take what is rightfully ours. The room erupted in applause, and Isaac felt a sense of hope. People were starting to rally behind their cause. As the meeting continued, more families shared their stories. They spoke about intimidation and the pressure they had faced. The sense of unity grew stronger. But then, an unexpected voice rang out from the back of the room. You're all making a mistake. It was Ezra, a respected elder in the community. We need to consider the offers. Progress is important. Isaac felt a wave of frustration. Ezra, we can't sacrifice our community for money. The developers don't care about us. They only care about profits. Ezra shook his head, looking conflicted. We've always been a peaceful community. Maybe we should find a way to negotiate instead of fighting. Sarah stepped in. But at what cost? Negotiation won't stop the developers from trying to take our land. We need to show strength. The room grew quiet as people considered both sides. Isaac felt the tension rising, but refused to back down. We need to unite. If we don't stand together, we will lose everything that makes this community special. As the discussion continued, Isaac noticed some people nodding in agreement, while others appeared uncertain. He knew they had to find a way to address everyone's concerns. It was crucial to keep the community united. After a long and heated discussion, a woman named Leah stood up. I've been scared to speak out, but I can't stay silent anymore. My family has faced pressure, and we won't sell. We need to protect our homes. Her words resonated with many in the room. More people began to share their stories, echoing Leah's sentiments. The tide was shifting, and Isaac felt a renewed sense of hope. As the meeting drew to a close, Isaac encouraged everyone to come together for future actions. We need to stay informed and organized. Let's set up a committee to keep communication open and plan our next steps. The crowd erupted in applause once more. Isaac felt a sense of accomplishment. They were united, ready to take on the developers together. But as he left the meeting, the weight of Thomas's warning echoed in his mind. The fight was far from over, and Isaac knew they had to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. After the meeting, Isaac felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The community had united, but he knew the developers would not back down easily. They had already shown their willingness to intimidate those who stood in their way. He spent the next few days working closely with the newly formed committee, planning their next steps. As they gathered information about the developers, Isaac began to uncover more troubling details. He learned that the developers had a history of using underhanded tactics to acquire land. They had been involved in similar cases across the state, often leaving communities divided and weak. One evening, while reviewing documents at home, Isaac received a call from Sarah. I found something interesting, she said, her tone urgent. "Meet me at the library." Isaac quickly drove to the library, his heart racing. When he arrived, Sarah was waiting for him at a table, surrounded by open files and books. She looked excited but serious. "I found a connection between the developers and some local officials," she said, pointing to a document. Isaac scanned the paper, his eyes widening. It detailed financial contributions from the developers to political campaigns. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "They're buying influence. This explains why they're able to push us around." Sarah nodded, her expression firm. "If we can prove this connection, it could help us expose their corruption. We need to gather more evidence." Isaac felt a surge of determination. "Let's dig deeper. We can't let them get away with this." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, reaching out to local officials and digging into public records. They found more evidence of the developers' connections to key figures in the community. It was a web of corruption that stretched far beyond what they had initially suspected. As they uncovered more details, Isaac shared their findings with the committee. They held another meeting, this time with a sense of urgency in the air. Isaac presented their research, showing how the developers had manipulated the system to gain control over local land. "This isn't just about our homes anymore," he said, his voice strong. "This is about justice. We cannot let these developers destroy our community for profit." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement. People were beginning to see the bigger picture. They were not just fighting for their land, they were fighting against corruption and injustice. One of the committee members, a local farmer named Moses, spoke up. "We need to take this to the authorities. We can't just sit back and let them continue this way." Isaac nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I agree. We need to gather all our evidence and present it to the local officials. If they won't listen, we may need to go to the press." The group discussed the best approach, knowing that they would need to be strategic. They decided to create a formal complaint that outlined their findings and demanded an investigation into the developers' practices. As the days passed, Isaac felt the pressure mounting. The developers were likely watching their every move, and he knew they would not hesitate to retaliate. But he also felt the support of the community behind him, and that gave him strength. Finally, the day came to present their findings to the local officials. Isaac, Sarah, and several committee members gathered in the town hall, clutching their documents. The room was filled with tension as they waited for the officials to arrive. When the meeting began, Isaac stood at the front, facing the officials. "Thank you for meeting with us today," he said, his voice steady. "We have serious concerns about the developers' practices in our community." He presented their evidence, showing the connections between the developers and local officials. As he spoke, he could see the officials exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable, while others appeared defensive. Sarah stepped in, explaining the impact of the developers on local families. "These tactics are not just unethical, they are hurting our community. We demand an investigation into their practices." The officials listened, but Isaac could see skepticism in their eyes. "We appreciate your concerns," one of the officials said, "but we need concrete evidence before we can take action." Isaac felt frustration bubble inside him. "We have evidence. These documents show clear connections. We need you to take this seriously." As the meeting continued, the officials remained non-committal. They promised to look into the matter but offered no guarantees. Isaac knew they had to push harder. The developers were powerful, and they would not back down without a fight. After the meeting, Isaac felt a mix of anger and determination. "We can't let them dismiss us," he said to Sarah and the committee members. "We need to take this to the public." Sarah agreed. "We should reach out to local newspapers and news stations. We need to expose the truth." That night, they worked late into the evening, drafting a press release that summarized their findings. They included quotes from community members, detailing the impact of the developers on their lives. Isaac felt a sense of urgency as they prepared to send it out. The next morning, Sarah contacted several local news outlets. Within hours, they began receiving responses. Journalists were interested in the story, eager to cover the community's fight against the developers. As the news spread, more families came forward to share their experiences. The community was rallying, and Isaac felt a surge of hope. This was their chance to expose the truth and stand against the corruption that threatened their homes. But as they gained momentum, Isaac also felt a sense of foreboding. The developers would not sit idly by. He knew they would retaliate. They had already shown their willingness to use intimidation tactics. That evening, as Isaac prepared for another meeting with the committee, he received a call from an unknown number. "You're making a big mistake," a deep voice said, sending chills down his spine. "You don't know what you're getting into." Isaac's heart raced. "Who is this?" But the caller hung up, leaving Isaac in silence. He felt a wave of fear wash over him. He knew the fight ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew they had to keep pushing forward. The truth needed to be uncovered, and he would not back down. The community was counting on him, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The tension in Isaac's chest grew heavier after the threatening call. He shared the news with Sarah and the committee at their next meeting. They gathered in Isaac's farmhouse, the atmosphere thick with anxiety. "I received a strange call last night," Isaac said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Someone warned me that we're making a big mistake." Sarah frowned, her eyes narrowing. "This is exactly what we've been worried about. The developers will try to intimidate us." Isaac nodded. "But we can't let fear control us. We have to keep pushing forward. We're gathering momentum, and the community is starting to wake up." The committee agreed, and they decided to move forward with their plans. They had gathered a substantial amount of evidence against the developers. It was time to take their findings to the press and the public. In the following days, their story gained traction. Local newspapers began publishing articles about the developers' questionable practices. Interviews with community members revealed the pressure and intimidation they faced. As the story circulated, more families came forward to share their experiences. Isaac felt a swell of pride as he watched the community rally together. They were standing up for their rights, refusing to be silenced. But he also sensed the danger increasing. The developers would not take this lying down. One evening, as Isaac was reviewing documents at home, he heard a loud knock on the door. Startled, he opened it to find Sarah standing there, her face pale. "Isaac, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. She handed him a newspaper. As he read the headline, his stomach dropped. "Developer accuses community of harassment." The article claimed that the protests were causing disturbances and that the developers felt threatened by the community's actions. "This is a lie," Isaac said, feeling anger rise within him. "They're trying to turn the community against us." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "We need to respond. We can't let them control the narrative." Isaac agreed. They quickly drafted a statement to clarify the community's position. They emphasized that they were simply standing up for their rights and that the accusations were unfounded. Sarah contacted the local news outlets, urging them to cover the community's side of the story. As the days passed, the tension escalated. The developers began to send representatives to the community meetings, trying to undermine their efforts. They claimed to be the victims and accused the community of harassment. Isaac felt frustration building. "We need to confront them directly," he said during a committee meeting. "We can't let them spread lies without a response." The committee agreed to organize a public meeting with the developers. They would invite the community to attend and address the accusations head-on. Isaac felt a mix of fear and excitement. This was a chance to confront the developers openly. On the day of the meeting, the community center was packed. People filled every chair, their faces a mix of determination and anxiety. Isaac could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders. As the meeting began, Isaac introduced the developers and their representatives, who sat at a table across the room. The tension was palpable. Thomas Hartwell, the lead developer, stood up to speak. "We understand that there are concerns, but we are trying to bring progress to this community. We believe that development is essential for economic growth." Isaac stood up, feeling the fire inside him. "But at what cost? You're trying to take our homes. You're using intimidation and lies to push us around." Thomas smirked, his confidence unwavering. "This is simply business. You can't expect progress without some sacrifices." Isaac glanced at the crowd, noting the anger in their eyes. "This isn't just business, it's our lives. We won't stand by and let you destroy our community." The crowd erupted in applause, and Isaac felt a surge of hope. They were ready to fight back. As the meeting continued, community members began to share their stories. They spoke about the pressure they had faced from the developers and the impact it had on their families. The atmosphere shifted as more voices joined in, echoing Isaac's sentiments. But then, one of the developers stood up, a man named Carl, who had been silent until now. "You're all just being emotional," he said dismissively. "This is about progress. You'll thank us once the development is done." Isaac felt his anger boil over. "Thank you. For what? For taking away our homes and our way of life? You don't understand what this community means to us." The crowd was on edge, and Isaac could feel the tension rising. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that the developers were trying to divide the community. They attempted to create doubt, suggesting that not everyone was against the development. Isaac knew they had to stay united. When the meeting finally ended, Isaac felt drained but determined. They had stood up to the developers, but the fight was far from over. As he left the community center, Sarah caught up with him. We need to keep pushing. We can't let them get away with this. Isaac nodded, feeling the weight of the battle ahead. We need to keep gathering evidence and keep the community informed. We can't let them divide us. The next few days were filled with planning and strategizing. The committee continued to gather stories and evidence, reaching out to families who had not yet spoken up. But as they worked, Isaac received another warning. A note was slipped under his door that read, "Stop this now, or you'll regret it." Isaac's heart raced as he read the message. He shared it with Sarah and the committee, who were all alarmed. "This is getting dangerous," Sarah said. "They're trying to intimidate us." Isaac felt a wave of anger. "We can't back down. They want us to be afraid, but we have to keep fighting for our community." In the following days, they continued to organize and prepare. They knew the developers would not stop, and the threat level was rising. But Isaac felt more determined than ever. They would expose the truth, no matter the cost. The fight for justice was reaching a boiling point, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The tension in the community reached a peak as the fight against the developers intensified. Isaac knew they had to take decisive action. The notes, the threats, and the pressure had only strengthened his resolve. With the support of the committee and the community, he felt ready to confront the developers one last time. The committee organized a public meeting to share all their findings. They planned to present their case to the entire community, emphasizing the evidence against the developers and the need for unity. Isaac felt a sense of urgency. They had to act before the developers could strike back. On the day of the meeting, the community center was packed. People filled every seat, and the energy in the room was electric. Isaac stood at the front, feeling both nervous and empowered. He could see familiar faces, friends, neighbors, and families who had all come together to fight for their homes. Sarah began the meeting, outlining the evidence they had gathered over the past few weeks. She emphasized the connections between the developers and local officials, detailing how the community had been manipulated. As she spoke, Isaac could see the crowd's anger grow. "This is not just about land. It's about our rights," Sarah said passionately. "We deserve to live in a community that respects our voices." Isaac stepped forward, his heart racing. "We cannot let fear silence us. We face threats, intimidation, and lies. But we are stronger together. We have to show the developers that we will not back down." The crowd erupted in applause, and Isaac felt a surge of hope. He knew they were united, and they had to keep that momentum going. As the meeting continued, more community members shared their stories. They spoke about the pressure they had faced and the impact it had on their families. The room was filled with emotion as people connected through their shared experiences. Isaac listened intently, feeling the weight of their words. They were not just fighting for their land, they were fighting for each other. After the testimonies, Isaac addressed the crowd again. "We need to take this fight to the next level. We must reach out to the media and demand an official investigation into the developers. We need to show the world what is happening here." The crowd responded with cheers and applause. They were ready to take action. As the meeting concluded, the committee began to draft a formal complaint to present to the authorities. They wanted to ensure that their voices were heard and that the developers could no longer operate unchecked. Isaac felt a renewed sense of purpose as they worked together, gathering evidence and preparing their case. In the following days, they reached out to local news stations, inviting journalists to cover their story. The media began to take interest in the community's fight against the developers. Articles were published and news segments aired, highlighting the struggles faced by families in the area. Isaac felt a surge of hope as their story gained traction. But as the pressure mounted, Isaac received another warning. This time, it was a phone call. The same deep voice from before echoed in his ear. "You're making a mistake, Isaac. Back off, or there will be consequences." Isaac's heart raced, but he felt more determined than ever. "I won't back down. We are fighting for our homes and our community." As the days passed, the community continued to rally. They held protests, shared their stories, and united against the developers' tactics. Isaac felt proud to stand alongside his neighbors, knowing they were all in this together. Finally, the day came when they would present their formal complaint to the local authorities. The committee gathered at the town hall, ready to confront the officials. Isaac felt a mix of nerves and determination as they walked into the building. As they entered the meeting room, they were met by several local officials. Isaac took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Thank you for meeting with us today. We are here to present our concerns about the developers and their practices in our community." He presented their evidence, detailing the connections between the developers and local officials. The room was tense as he spoke, and he could see the officials exchanging glances. Some appeared uncomfortable, while others seemed defensive. Sarah followed, emphasizing the impact of the developers on local families. We have gathered evidence of intimidation and manipulation. We demand an investigation into their practices. As they spoke, Isaac could feel the energy in the room shifting. The officials began to take notice, and it seemed like the community's voices were finally being heard. After their presentation, the officials promised to review the evidence and take the community's concerns seriously. Isaac felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had taken a significant step toward justice. As they left the meeting, Isaac and the committee members shared a sense of accomplishment. They had fought against the odds, standing up for their rights and their community. But Isaac knew this was just the beginning. The developers would not back down easily, and the fight was far from over. In the following weeks, the community continued to unite. They organized rally after rally, gaining more support and spreading awareness. The pressure on the developers increased as the media continued to cover their story. Then, one day, they received the news they had been waiting for. The local authorities announced an official investigation into the developers' practices. Isaac felt a surge of joy and relief. Their hard work had paid off, and the truth was finally coming to light. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the developers had engaged in unethical practices. They had manipulated local officials and used intimidation to achieve their goals. The community's fight had exposed the truth, and justice was on the horizon. Isaac reflected on the journey they had taken. The fight for their homes had brought the community together in a way he never thought possible. They had faced fear, intimidation, and uncertainty, but they had emerged stronger. As the investigation continued, Isaac felt a deep sense of gratitude for his neighbors and friends. They had all come together to protect their way of life, and he knew that their unity would prevent similar threats in the future. The story of the community's fight became a symbol of hope for others facing similar challenges. They had proven that when people stand together, they can overcome even the darkest obstacles. Isaac knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he felt ready to face them. The Stoltzfus family's memory lived on through the strength of the community they had built. Together, they would continue to protect their home and ensure that their voices would never be silenced again. Years later, Isaac would often sit on his porch in the evenings, looking out over the fields that remained in the hands of his community. The developers had been forced to abandon their plans after the investigation revealed the full extent of their corruption. Several local officials had been removed from office, and new protections were put in place to prevent such manipulation in the future. The fight had changed Isaac in ways he never expected. He had discovered a strength within himself and his community that he never knew existed. The memory of his brother Amish and his family, Rebecca, Jacob, Benjamin, Mary, Katie, and little Anna, remained a driving force in his life. Though the mystery of their disappearance was never fully solved, Isaac found some peace in knowing that their legacy lived on through the community's resilience. The Stoltzfus family had not died in vain. Their story had become the foundation upon which a stronger, more united community was built. The barn where Isaac had found Amos's journal became a small memorial. Community members would often visit to remember not only the Stoltzfus family, but all those who had stood up for what was right. It served as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and justice could prevail when people came together with a common purpose. Isaac's fight for his brother's family had evolved into something much larger, a fight for the soul of their community itself. And in that fight, they had all emerged victorious, stronger, and more united than ever before.